Welcome back and welcome to the first real class of this training journey. We kick off this course with explaining you the most fundamental basis for your training and controlling as a whole, knowing the proper documentation. As you're embarking on your journey to become an S3 controller, it is important that you develop yourself as a controller as well. This means developing a structured way of getting new information. Therefore, this presentation is about the type of documentation we use and where you can find it. And it all starts with the legal basis. The documents that determines what exactly you are supposed to do. There are tons of different kinds of documentation and navigating them is extremely difficult. But in essence, you need to remember that there are different levels of documentation to reference. A global, an international, a national, and a local. Each step built on top of each other, making almost like a pyramid of rules, which are based on each other and made in a way so that one must be as strict or stricter than the foundation it is built upon. It all starts at the most fundamental global level, through ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and their annexes and documents derived from them. The one that's very relevant to you is the ICAO Doc 4444 derived from Annex 2 and 11 concerning air traffic management. If you've been through our S2 pre-training, you should already be somewhat familiar with this document, as most of the S2 content is based on this. Now, as we move a level up, we also want to move up a level in documentation and introduce you to the step above. Here we're entering an international set of rules tailored to a specific region. Since we in Denmark are part of Europe, we adhere to the regulations laid out by the EASA. Their document for us in this case is EASA 373, Rules for ATM ANS, and it is an enormous 1,000-page document. Luckily, all you need can be found in one of the many annexes it consists of, namely Part ATS. This part has two subparts, whereas Subpart B, Technical Requirements for ATS, has all the good information you need. Lots of what is written here is identical to ICAO Doc 4444, here shown on the right side of the screen, with the EASA Part ATS on the left, but we will reference this EASA document mainly for your S3 training though. First of all, to train you in using the different documentation types, and secondly because, in our opinion, Part ATS gives you the information in a much more user-friendly layout, as well as containing color-coded headers on whether it's the implemented rule themselves, the dry binding text that's called hard law, acceptable means of compliance, of how you should enforce them, this is called soft law, or simply guidance material to help you understand how to use them. However, we have ICAO as the global level and EASA at the international level. However, there's also a level above. This is when we move to the national level. This is the rules made by the Danish Civil Aviation Authorities, known as Trafikstyrelsen. That's in Danish, and is published as a different set of documents labeled ATS instructions. There should already be a small bell ringing for you, as you've been taught the ATS instruction 14 through your S2 training. Just like EASA 373 built on top of Doc 4444 with stricter variations, so does the ATS instructions built on top of EASA 373 with stricter variations as well. So then why not just use these ATS instructions as our source material? True, it's theoretically more precise, but first of all, it's not as intuitively set up as EASA 373, and second and more importantly, the public accessible versions of ATS instructions are only in Danish, and hence not ideal to our international students. Considering that there are almost no variations when it comes to VATSIM relevant material, we therefore only reference the ATS instructions when absolutely necessary. For example, when it comes to phraseology, because here we have to make sure we're referencing the exact phrases that are allowed to be used in Denmark. That's the three levels of legal documentation: global, international, and national, namely ICAO Doc 4444, EASA Part ATS, and Trafikstyrelsen's ATS instructions. And remember, this is just a small part of the ocean of documentation, because this structure is not only for ATC, it is also relevant for pilots. And this is also relevant for you to read. In order to know what instructions to use, it is important to know what the pilots are allowed to do, so there is plenty to read. During your controlling career, you may be needing to reference these documents as well. The pilot equivalent of Doc 4444, for example, would be the ICAO Doc 8168, where you find all sorts of information like what speeds aircraft are allowed to fly in holding and how is an approach structured. You see? Relevant. EASA builds on top of it with the EASA 965 rules for air operations. And lastly, of course, the Danish authorities built on top of that as well with their BL series called Bestemmelser for Luftfart, meaning Rules of Air Traffic in Danish, as well as the local AIP. We try to guide you the best we can in this lesson through the relevant material that will further your level as controller. But here towards the end, you may be confused. It seems like there was 4 levels, but we've only discussed 3. This is because there is a 4th, which arguably is the most important one. That is taken a level further up on top of the national level and up on a what we can call a local level. For pilots, there would be equivalent of an SOP of an airline, for example. And we have on the ATC side the same. A series of instructions built on top of the ATS instructions of the authorities, labeled local ATS instructions, or for short in everyday terms, LAI, LAI. Since this last level is not publicly accessible information, we've had to construct our version of the LAI in Denmark to contain what we believe is relevant for operations on VATSIM. And we don't just have one, we have a lot of LAIs. We have an LAI for each airport, with Copenhagen split up, and one for ACC. You should always have studied and be familiar with the LAI series for the airport you are sitting on. Normally, a real-world controller would only need to be familiar with one of these, but since you may sit on any airport in Denmark, you need to be familiar with all of these versions of the LAI, which we then in turn are making a little bit simpler for VATSIM reasons. Once you navigate to where you're sitting, you will see that an LAI is just like the ATS instructions. They're divided into chapters that we call LAI 1, LAI 2, LAI 3, etc. These documents will contain specific procedures, especially related to coordination requirement, variation from parent rules, and general guidance material for specific rules. For example, from Doc 4444, 8.7.3 and onwards to Pod ADS TR210 and ATC Instruction 10 Appendix A, you can read all about the reduced separation that may be used for 2.5 miles if a long list of conditions are filled. That is in all these 3 documents pretty much identical. The LAI for Copenhagen will state the specificities of allowing specifically Copenhagen, as the only airport in Denmark, to invoke this reduced separation, which for example is as long as the tower is informed, no tilt with a crosswind, using 2 2s and 0 4s, you have 2 separate controllers, etc, etc. This is just one example of how we are adjusting real-world procedure to fit with VATSIM. For example, we have removed the real-world requirement of a braking coefficient because that's difficult to simulate on the VATSIM network anyway. So all in all, the LAI are the most important documents to know by heart on a day-to-day basis. And remember, what is not written in the LAI is not written because it's not a local variation. So go down a level or 2 and reference the right documentation. Knowing all of this and using these documents effectively and studying them in your own time as well is what will set you apart from not just being an adequate approach controller, but being a great approach controller. Thank you very much for following this lesson. You may now continue. Enjoy your course.